All right, here we
Yeah, yeah, I could get that. Yeah, yeah, sure.
And we are back on.
Yay!
welcome to the after show. Is everybody everybody seeing us? Let's see.
Yeah, anybody want to dump in here and give feedback on that? That technically counts as my first creation evolution debate.
Well, it's just it turned out rather well because Dr. Huffman and I have been going back and forth. I mean, the way we were all talking, friendly and happy. It's like we all go out for drinks every night. If you've seen us on Twitter, we go back and forth on just about all of these issues, and we have diametrically opposed views. But like you said during
that's who'd have thunk?
Yeah, like you said during the show, we don't do any name calling or mudslinging or anything of that sort. All right, so you say normally you like to just put the link out for everybody. Anybody wants to join in, right?
Yeah, I think so. Right. Especially in this context, it's your call, but I have no objections on it.
This
Heck,
is just...
if we get a flat earther, that'd be fun. I could draw Steve in here.
I
see Calcetti knocking around in there.
If we get a flat earther, we bring him over to Steve's.
Steve's wants an invite in. Is there an invite link? Paulogia says Steve wants an invite in. Well, give the damn guy a invite in.
All right. Well, RJ likes to invite everybody in, so it's going to be in the public chat. Here we go. Anybody wants to join? You are welcome. Welcome.
Whee! Steve McCrae, invite yes.
All right. I wonder if we're going to be seeing Steve.
The pug.
Do you think we're going to be seeing Steve trying to join?
I think. You think we can entice Steve to come in?
I don't know.
Please, Steve, come in.
Steve, if it's convenient for you, I would be very happy.
Oh, sir, please, do grace us the honor of your presence so that we may commiserate and communicate and otherwise expound in extempore.
This is gonna shock you, RJ, but Steve has joined us. Hi, Steve.
Hello, friends. Hello.
Hello. Now, are you? I gather you were somewhat frustrated, Steve, with the moderation skills. You were.
No, modding was fine. I mean, God, how long do we have? Is this like a 3-hour program? Because this may take a while.
You guys can do what you want.
No, modding was fine, except that it got away from the actual discussion. The discussion was supposed to be on evolution, and you allowed, and James allowed him to do what all yoga creationists do. Eventually, wanting to get to a argument, a morality argument. And that's not the topic. If they want to have
actually, in this case,
from the starting gate, boy, that was
exactly right. Well, right, and that's you just have to keep him back on topic. I mean, that's what I keep doing, like with Hovind. I keep migrating him back to whatever the topic is. But if the topic happens to be like objective morality, which like Negation he was debating Kent about, then that's the topic. And then if they go to evolution, we move them back into morality. You have to keep it.
Yeah. I treat it all as an improv context. If we had had more time, I definitely wanted to get to the whole issue of how you identify a transitional form. And there, I think it would have been an interesting discussion, but we didn't have time because the daughter needed to be put to bed. So there we go.
Yeah, and that's understandable. I think somebody asked in the live chat, maybe it was Raynard, I don't remember, but somebody had asked a great question. What would you expect for a transitional fossil from A to B if you're talking about different lines of phylogeny? Great question. I've never heard a younger creationist really give a good answer for that.
That was one of the.
And since I know the material he would have written, I love the thing where he would want to send me links to these things. Excuse me, I got 4,500 young Earth creationist sources in my bibliography. I probably read more of this crap than you have, Mark. I mean, let's get a grip.
I should mention that we were bringing in a young Earth creationist into this. It was not surprising or unexpected that the objective morality question would be brought up because it's all part of it. If we were arguing with a non-theistic anti-evolutionist, then I'd agree with you, Steve. But we were bringing in
an idea would have done exactly the same thing. If you were dealing with anybody from the Discovery Institute, they would have slid off into morality too. This is common currency in anti-evolutionism. It's all part of a dogs and cats living together if you believe in nasty evolution.
Yes.
By the way. I rearranged my mic. Is that better? Apologies, so my mic was low. So there was a lot of questions that we could have got into from the Q&A, but like you said, he had to go obviously because his doctor fully understand.
Yeah, we'll do it again.
We'll do it again. Know him, right? So this will be something that will happen again.
Yeah, and he said the one good thing is, see, this was a little unfair to put these two together. It was just something that came up rather quickly. We were trying to get it together for a couple of weeks, so we just have a talk, and it was okay, bang, we're on. But Dr. Huffman is not well versed in the whole reptile-mammal transition thing. So
and there's a reason why.
Well, yes,
because I know all the material he could have read,
yeah,
so that's why I can be confident in this area. That if he wanted to, he could have read Woodmorat, but he didn't even know that.
Well, the good thing is,
can I get a mic check real quick? They're saying my mic is still.
Now you're
good. Yeah, you're okay now.
You were a little crunchy a minute ago.
Now. Okay, so when they catch it up to live chat, they can let me know.
You were sounding the way Mark looked.
Far off and not paying attention.
What was the color?
No.
It was kind of a reddish thing. Yeah.
Yeah, that might be.
Yeah, it looked like somebody had said they looked like he licked his camera.
It does have
maybe the daughter had done a little more. She
does have a child in the house.
Not a good camera.
There is a child in the house, so these things happen. But anyway.
What got me is when he started getting into macroevolution, and it's like, and RJ, that's when you should have obviously waited your turn and then pounced on him for him, saying to him, start off as speciation, explain to him, macroevolution is just microevolution in multiple species. So if you're dealing with multiple species and various processes, you have macroevolution. It's not something that is not observed. We observe it all the time. We know macroevolution exists. We've seen macroevolution in polyploidy and whole genome duplication. These are facts. These are not interpretation of the facts. These are facts. Facts are not up for interpretation. Facts are what comports with reality. That's what he wants to get into. He wants to get into this epistemic position where you're not sure of anything. Well, we're not sure of the facts. Well, yeah, they're facts. They comport with reality. That's what the
informal polling seems to be going on in the room. Who won the debate?
A draw. You know what? I'm going to go say with a draw. You guys didn't get anywhere.
I could say with each party's audience, honestly, it's the same in most debates I've seen. With the supporters of each party, that is who won. Ken Ham's followers think he won against Bill Nye because they believed what he was saying. I don't know if it's possible to declare a win-lose. That's why I prefer. I mean, we call this a debate. I prefer to call them conversations. Really, it's too bad it had to be so.
Can I jump in?
Sure.
Okay.
Yes.
I'll have to introduce myself because there are two people in here who I don't think are quite familiar with me. My name is Peter. I go by the name of Gonna Go For It.
Hi, Peter.
Hey, James.
I'm familiar with you, Peter.
Hey, James. Well, I jumped in because I wanted to say a little thing because Mr. Huffman probably is on my channel this weekend. And I'm doing this in a different format, and I think for good reason because it could only be me, but the debate format always gives people a way out, and I think the more honest conversation would be to not have a timed format.
I have to agree with you, actually. And the second. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
And I think James would also, because I noticed him jumping in all the time, and I was pretty much screaming at the screen at the same points. In a debate format, you give the opponent the chance to run away from the topic, and that's, as far as I'm concerned, what Huffman was doing most of the time.
Right, and that should
I
be
like a
recognized
Socratic method.
by
a Socratic question and answer thing, for me, is more comfortable and informative.
Yeah, well, this was the first half. We ran out of time because the young lady had to go to sleep. Second part, after the formatted questions, was questions to each other between RJ and Dr. Huffman. that's more freeform because it's not a timed sort of thing. And then questions from the live chat again is not a timed sort of thing. Everyone gets to give a complete answer. But I wanted to have some structured part to make sure that everyone, talking about two people, both parties got a chance to at least get their opinions out, their knowledge out. And I think by alternating it, each party at least got that. Each one got a fair shake, and we would have been prepared if we had more time. We're going to do.
It was fine for a first discussion. I mean, I prefer the back and forth open type. That's what, my channel's predicated upon. But there are times to have a structured format. Some people prefer them, like the Bill Lolo. He did a wonderful structured format on his debate. So it not a one size fits all. But this particular topic with these particular gentlemen, because both of them, I assume, would be very. I know RJ is extremely knowledgeable. Huffman, correct me wrong, is an anesthesiologist, so he can't be, it can't be an idiot. He has to, have a knowledge base. So, I think in that particular kind of structure, a more back and forth, one-on-one would probably be a better way to go. But again, it's situational.
And both really, in this particular, I thought about it quite a bit, and I figured having both would accomplish all the goals. I wanted a free-flowing, well, what do you think of this? And you get to say what you actually think rather than stick it in 3 minutes. But I also wanted to guarantee that the structure would give everyone a fair shake. And had we not run out of time, I think it would have turned out that way. But
why couldn't he come back after he put his daughter to sleep? I mean, is it past his bedtime too?
I have no idea.
Yeah, it isn't that late. It's only about 9:30.
Seriously, it's not that late. Because I mean, I would have liked to ask him about Tompkins' work. I would have loved to ask him, and RJ probably would have too, about Tompkins' claim on human chromosomes number 2. We have yet to have a young Earth creationist from ICR talk about that. Now, Jerry Bergman says he will. I have to contact him on Monday. James, you're more than welcome to come in and join us in that. Ruhif will be in that discussion when I arrange it.
What the particulars on what time?
Well, I have to arrange it first. He's on a trip right now. He'll be back Monday, but he is willing to. He's really, you know what? He seems like a nice guy, to be honest with you. He's been very, very friendly to me.
Who is that?
Jerry Bergman.
Oh, Bergman. Yeah. What?
Yeah, he's very, very friendly. Unlike Humphreys is very
unlike his writings.
Yeah, from his writings, he's very, very. He's on that pro-Nazi evolution stuff, right? Oh, evolution's from Hitler, that kind of crap, right?
Oh yeah, he's a fascinating character. But for me, the moment that I liked most was the expression on Mark's face when I asked him if he'd ever source checked any of his material. And boy, it
was a good question.
Fit exactly my anticipation, because there was just this look of like I just asked him to use Norgelflar Blackniggy. I mean, it's just complete gibberish to him, that the idea that he would need to do that was literally incomprehensible to him. And I'm going, duh, that's the problem.
So somebody in the live chat said anesthesiologist is not exactly rocket science, not any sort of science at all. Actually, anesthesiologists probably have to know more than most doctors. They do a lot of palliative care. They do pro-stop. Anesthesiologists are very.
Remember, Ben Carson is a brain surgeon. Hello, Paul.
It's not just put them under and then wait until the operation's over. It's a constant thing. But first case.
Paul's here. We need a moment to recognize his greatness.
Good enough.
Hi.
Hi, Paul. Look, before I forget, first case asked in the public chat. Yes, could we not have scheduled it earlier? Actually, we would have, and perhaps on a different day. This time it was not to conflict with RJ's Evolution Hour on his channel, because he's building the channel, he's getting more viewers, and if anyone hasn't gone over and subbed, by all means do so. We're done. But that's why it was scheduled an hour later today. So
I just subbed to Peter because I liked his entry video. It had boobs.
Peter is good people.
Yeah.
Any video that has boobs, you got me.
Okay.
Did you see?
You'll be a little bit disappointed because I have 2 intros. I have one for male guests and one for female guests. The one for female guests, I think, is a little bit more disappointing.
Oh. I'll take the one for the male guest.
It has the same boobs, but things turn out a little bit worse.
Quite differently
for Adam in that one.
Yeah, but RJ wants that second one now, so you.
RJ is gay, so he has a limitation on his interests. Paul, did you see the debate I had with Mark?
I certainly did. You know, I was
your reaction to it.
So you're a strong guy, right? Your feelings are never hurt.
Mm-hmm.
Uh-oh.
I kind of feel like Mark won. Like as a relatively former younger creationist, you kind of fell into the traps that his argument, like his the arguments that he made are would have rang really true to his audience. Like you didn't specifically address the presupposition stuff at all. You didn't.
Well, there's no way to address a presuppositional argument for me. They're going to presuppose. They're going to presuppose, and there's no way of breaking through that. I'm not aiming.
No. You can totally. You totally diffuse it. You lay it out. Like when I talk to presup, you lay it out. You say, yeah, I have two presuppositions too. The universe exists, and you can learn something from it. Boom, we both have presuppositions. Let's move on.
There you go. Those are my two presuppositions too.
If you just agree that you both have presuppositions, they have nowhere to go.
And you ask them, without those two basal presuppositions, right? Those are properly basic beliefs. How do you formulate an epistemological framework on anything? If I don't believe that the universe exists, if I don't assume the universe exists, how do I ever acquire knowledge from anything? You can't. So everybody kind of has these basal assumptions. Some might call it coherentism, right? They may not call it an assumption. But if you're a foundationist or foundherentist, that's fine. So you could diffuse that right off the bat to say, yeah, I've got precepts, but show me that the universe isn't real. There you go. That's all you have to do to diffuse that.
And then,
I think Paul has a point. I've recently I've gained a co-host on my channel, Karis. Karis is a former young Earth creationist, and she at least taught me that there are different ways of thinking. So you need a different approach, and I'm still learning. But it's also the fact that at some words they are triggered to pull up a defense that you can't break that easily. So I'm still working on that, and I'm hoping that Karis can at least help me there, and we'll have a conversation about it soon. When that's up, I strongly suggest everybody go watch that, because that could be useful in having a conversation with a young Earth creationist.
I like what you said about trigger words.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead, Paul.
Oh, I was just, the other part that for me, it felt like you were trying to put Mark on trial for the work of all creationists. You used the word always and never more than I'm comfortable with, and because of that, again, being on the other side, having been a younger creationist for so long, always and never are just words that kind of put people off.
I know. Unfortunately, I meant it literally.
I know you do, but when you're the listener, I put myself back to a couple years ago when I believed everything Mark believed. You fed into that narrative for them.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going,
there's nothing I can do about that. Yeah, because I won't pretend that there are some anti-evolutionists that don't fail that test, because there aren't any.
Well, but then then you say everyone. I mean, whatever. But it sounded like you're putting Mark on trial for all of their work, and all he.
Well, he was the one that cited them.
I know, but not always. And all he had to do was say, I'm not familiar with that work, or give me an example. And he was right to say so. He was right to come back to you and say, you've made an assertion, about being disingenuous. What's an example of being disingenuous? I think that was where Bill Ludlow's debate, and I would encourage you to watch that again. Bill had ready examples when he was going to attack Ken. He was like, he made the broad assertion, but he had ready a very specific example. And I know you know them off the top of your head, RJ. But unfortunately, because of the format, you didn't get a chance to do it. So all Mark had to do to totally diffuse the question, his audience, was say, well, show me an example, and there wasn't time for one.
Yeah, well, I did give a specific example of one he brought up, who was Michael Denton.
Actually, that is true. You did do that. Yeah, good. Anyway, those are just my observations. Like his demeanor was fed into his audience super well. Where I think your demeanor is much more aggressive, and that's the way it's always going to be. And we're glad that it is.
Like Popeye, I am what I am.
But you make a good point, Paul. When you're doing a debate, you're really debating to the audience. That's how debates are. Like them, hate them, whatever. You're really arguing to the audience and trying to get them on board. And I think, Paul, you're right. Mark probably would have came out favorably because he did cater to his audience. His audience was watching this. They would have came out saying, look, here we had a creationist. He was able to throw all this stuff out there. The other guy, James, he wasn't able to refute anything, and he looked pretty good. I agree with you. But I think James, have a little more practice. I think because you have so much knowledge, all you have to know now is when to implement it, pinpoint accuracy. So when they say something, you have a rebuttal ready to go because you already planned ahead what they're going to say, because you know what they're going to say, right? In the audience, I already know where Mark was going before he even went there, right? So you already have that in your head, and you show the audience, look, these are canards that have been thrown around forever. This is why they're wrong. Let me show you why they're wrong, and you just nail them. You do a haymaker, and go wild on them.
Yeah, if I'd had more time, because I could have specifically gone into what was wrong with spelling, and I could specifically have gone into what I tried a little bit of what was wrong with Woodmarat, but every one of those takes longer than 3 minutes.
Yeah, and that's the problem. A lot of them do, but you could make a summation on some of them, right? You don't have, if you get bogged down in minutia. The audience doesn't really care too much about the technical details. They just want to hear an overall, and then if the other side wants you to get into minutia, go ahead. But if you can just refute it even superficially, that's usually good enough. From what I've in my experience, my limited debating, but I've won all mine, so yay.
And I've done zero, so don't listen to anything I said. I'm just speaking as an audience listener.
And I'm agreeing with Paul. No, I'm agreeing with Paul. I think Paul's spot on. And I would disagree with him if I would say that I disagree with him. I do. You
would actually look forward to that, I'm sure.
I would. I'm trying to find something. I'll be like, God, hey, you know what, Paul? Man, you fucked up on this one. Let me talk to you. It's kind of like there was one guy you remember that one guy, how creationism taught me actual science or real science? Remember that guy, Tony?
Yeah, Tony Reed. Yeah,
Tony Reed. So I've been watching his videos. God, I love him. He's great. And I watched his one on polonium halos, hoping to actually find something that was wrong. Couldn't do it. I actually learned something. I was like, this is brilliant.
Yeah, I'm working with Tony on a couple of projects. I'm going to cross over a bit. It's great.
Yeah, really, really good. But see, we can recognize that. We can recognize when people know stuff. We can recognize when people are good. That's why, like Sidestrike, you got 30 viewers right now. Do you know how many freaking Mr. True Empiricism had earlier?
You're going to depress me now, aren't you? Really?
12. Yeah, that's been his high point. So I mean,
I thought you were going to say
good sources.
I thought you were going to say 10,000, and I was just going to click off and go to sleep.
No. You're kicking his ass because good channels get watched and good channels get noticed. And those other Clown Car Posse and Younger Creationist channels, they're not really that popular anymore because they just don't say anything. It's the same empty rhetoric.
How did you pick the questions?
I just tried to pick questions that I thought would give each party the chance to express their views. That's all. There's no particular aim, and I really tried to stay neutral in writing the questions. That's why
your questions were good.
Well, thanks.
Yeah, your questions were good. Well, I like the fact you would ask okay, does evolution destroy society? Which you already just knew the answer, but you also knew how AG would say how creationism is destroying society.
Yeah. Yeah, it was, and that was what when I asked the question, Mark was up first for that one. He says, how I'm going to answer this. Because we've had the argument probably 100 times on Twitter. So
but he only has a straw man version of evolution, right? That's what they all have. What he was saying about evolution just isn't right. That's not how it works. He uses very proprietary definitions in order to make his arguments.
And does it not seem that
he channels ICR and AIT?
Right, right.
And unless I've missed something, it seems there's been a subtle shift in the boundary between micro and macro. Like quite a while ago, the end of micro was speciation. Now it's not. Now,
okay.
Now
that's
the
easiest
way to look.
Anyway, go ahead.
What's that? I was just saying Go ahead. I'll explain it.
That's Todd Wood's fault with the whole baraminology movement. Now they now are shifting. Like they're encouraging everyone to use the language called variation. They don't even want them to say so that they can just say that anything that can vary within a kind, since they're just making up their own words.
There's the dynamic going on here because only creationists do systematics. Intelligent designers don't do it at all. There are 0 examples. They have no interest whatsoever in working out what, if anything, is related to anything else. But the young Earth creationists are forced by the booking plan on Noah's Ark number of kinds. They can't really fit more than 8,000 or so in the Ark. And so they've got to figure out how you get from the created kinds to the actual diversity. And bless them, they're trying to kind of figure this out, but they're constantly stumbling over their own feet because they're never going to make the pieces fit.
Yeah, it's an impossible puzzle. But like the word variation, they have hijacked that to mean something that it doesn't, right? You know, but here's the real simple way of looking at macro and micro. If you have one species, one population of a species, you're dealing at the micro level. You're looking at genetic drift and gene flow and adaptation by natural selection, all that in one single species, you're micro. As soon as you have 2 species, such as with cladogenesis, where you have something breaking into 2 different populations, or you're dealing with multiple populations, you're now in macroevolution. So it's the same processes, it's just in more than one population. That's macroevolution. So if you have a single one, you have allopatric speciation, where you have a divergence of a species because of a geological barrier into 2 species, bam, that is macro. Now, the younger creationists, they don't like that because they know we observe that. So they have to try to change it into something else.
Yeah.
Variation.
Indeed.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I knew a shift had occurred, and that pretty much explains why it was necessary if they were going to continue with their
RJ, do you agree with that?
Well, in the common parlance, the creationists can have no problem with something that's a lot like something else. So a doggish thing or an elephanty thing or a trilobite thing, they can actually, in principle, accommodate conceptually lots and lots and lots of variation. The collapses when it relates to human beings. So the average creationist always has had no problem with imagining even a phylum as a kind if it's not something that affects human beings. Human beings have to be specially created and everything else is negotiable. And that's been the case from the get-go.
Then that throws a lot of things out of whack because, as you know, Bill demonstrated, we have a lot of evidence of human lineage and human evolution and various precursors to humans with Australopithecus.
And that's why when creationists tie themselves up into knots, they can't quite decide where the Australopithecines fit in some cases, or the Homo erectuses and the Neanderthals. That you've got people all over the map on it, depending upon their particular mood. And yeah, and so this is inevitable, and that there can never be a universal standard how human beings. Anything that can allow equus in a monobaramin can't keep Australopithecines out of the human monobaramin by exactly the same logic. So they've got to figure, when you look at the actual baraminology work, you look and see at the down, Arandia, Cassia, and all the, he's going to bring up our Trinity.
You got a lot of windows open, RJ? You seem to be roboting over here.
I got most of it, but yeah, you're a little robotic.
Yeah, a little bit. But now, what about Kent Hovind?
Could very well be, yes.
Does Kent Hovind not just say?
What about Kent Hovind?
Before we move on from Mark, just one.
Yes.
Stupid squeak toy, silly kid, doggy. All I wanted to say was it'd be super fun to find examples for Mark that are like actually from the hospital, like really like from an audience perspective. If you can take things that Mark has to deal with all the time, be it they can't use antibiotics they can only use antibiotics in a limited fashion because of the evolution there, or whatever. I don't have a specific idea, but I know it's always fun when someone like Matt Dillahunty, for example, is super prepared with examples from the other person's field. Now back to Kent.
Well, not a bad idea.
The problem is that conceptually bacteria are still bacteria.
Yeah,
so that's a limitation for them.
I was just going to with Kent Hovind. Is his view still? Because I remember him many times saying the whole definition of kind. He had a definition of kind. A kind is something that can bring forth. Anything that can bring forth is a kind. That which cannot bring forth are different kinds.
Is not a kind.
Now, has that been amended at all, or is that still his view? Because that's what speciation.
It's hard to tell, but remember, Kent is a lower echelon creationist who crystallized his idea of creationism back in the 1980s. And so he's filtering material that's decades out of the stream of what goes on in baraminology, for example, in the 21st century.
Okay,
Kent could not understand baraminology. Kent doesn't understand phylogeny, so the newer stuff that the creationists are coming up with, he's outdated. He's considered the dinosaur of creationists among creationists anymore.
In the talk that I had with Kent Hovind, he still used it, and when I pressed him on it, he started to weasel out. So it's not a definitive point for him.
Okay, so that's his point when it's convenient then.
Oh, by the way, do you guys want to know? I just got the topic today for Friday's debate. Do you guys want to know what it is?
Yeah.
Yep.
Because Casey just sent to me earlier. It is, you're going to love this. Radiation, both nuclear and electromagnetic, disprove a young Earth.
What?
Yeah. That's what Casey's going to debate Kent about.
Okay.
Both nuclear and electromagnetic radiation. That's gonna be some pretty heavy duty stuff. I know. There's gonna be a presentation involved. I'm just hoping Casey doesn't go over everybody's heads, but I'm interested in nuclear and I'm interested in electromagnetics. So I would find it fascinating. I think if he starts going into things like tensor calculus and I mean, advanced stuff. I don't know how much of the audience is going to get lost.
Well, if anyone in this audience doesn't know, KC equals King Crocodile, just since you haven't said that.
Oh, sorry.
There you go.
King Crocodile debating Kent Hovind again on Friday. Plug the channel.
Well, it's always fun to hear Kent. He likes to kind of semi-name drop, so he likes to give the impression. There was a little excerpt where Paul, in fact, had put me onto it, where he was asking about this thing about the Boyle's law and star formation that I was kind of doing some research on as a result of it. But in the little snippet of Kent Hovind, I think they did it from 2010, he was giving the impression that he was like schmoozing with some physicists, and they were like talking about, and the physicists were explaining why they were thinking the Boyle's law didn't apply, but he was sure that it didn't. Like he actually was communicating with scientists at a level that I don't think he was ever doing.
How is he applying Boyle's law in the universe? Boyle's law generally goes to a closed system.
It wasn't an original idea. This one had been knocking around in creationism for quite a while. It's a minor little foible. It's the notion that Boyle's law doesn't allow gases to coalesce into stars. And that supposedly the physicist, it has to do, in fact, there's a whole bunch of
I know the argument. I know the argument.
Shock waves and all these other things.
I know about the Val shock.
Yeah, it's kind of like a side view.
But since Paul's having a video on it, I don't want to go too much into it. But yeah, I do know the theory behind it. How you have shock wave and bow waves going through different things that got coalesce. But I don't understand how I just don't know how they use Boyle's law, because Boyle's law, it deals with a pressure in a system in an enclosed container, right?
Well, there had been some technical work apparently in astrophysics like 15 years ago. That we're just applying it as a side issue as to the dynamics of cosmic clouds, and that it had theoretical applications for little side issues in the formation of stars. And so it's like an asterisk. But boy, you bring up Boyle, an old scientist of the old school, and a law And you know, that thing had percolated through. I think Menton and a few other people had flitted on it over the years. It's not a big deal thing, but remember, it only needs to have been said by some creationist at some point and then get lodged in Kent's brain, and there it sticks like an unmelting iceberg from that point on.
Yeah, I agree. They don't even want to look into the stuff that even makes sense. I mean, look at like the whole second law thermodynamic thing. That doesn't ever die.
Yeah.
It doesn't ever die. It'll never die.
Well, and intelligent design land, which is just hilarious.
Let's see. Anything interesting in the... I'm just looking through the public chat to see who wins mitts. All right, so I maintain...
Too bad you're going to get Huffman for the after show. That would have been nice.
Yeah, well, I'm sure it's, you know...
I got questions for him, so next time you have him on, you have an open... Let's have an open hangout.
We will do that. The first... we only got halfway through what we wanted to... I'm referring to myself as plural again. We only got halfway through what I wanted to accomplish today before we ran out of time.
Sorry, I didn't do better.
No. It was.
You know what? Practice, man. Practice.
Yeah, and it's a. These are contentious issues for everybody. I mean, if you don't think
debating is a skill, man. Debating takes practice. I don't think you've actually. Have you done much like this kind of debating before, Jay?
Oh, this is literally my second debate, because my first debate was the one with the law professor over in Seattle on Grease v. Galloway, and so this was literally my first debate with a creationist.
Well, there you go. So it just takes practice. You've got the knowledge. Now learning how to win in a debate, as far as, because winning a debate isn't based so much on knowledge. It's debate. It's more.
And remember to get that presupposition card out there really damned fast.
Yeah, it's maneuvering as much as knowledge.
It's maneuvering.
So
yeah, it's maneuvering. It's placement. It is trying to point out to the audience that the other guy is wrong and why they're wrong.
Okay, I could have.
I'll be curious to see whether or not he actually makes good on actually checking out the stuff that I've got at my website, and or whether he drops into any of the spots and actually says hi and so forth and so on. Because theoretically, I'm an open book. You can see what I have to say. You can see my arguments. You can see the evidence that I draw on, and you could theoretically do that.
Paul the Skeptic in the live chat makes a good piece of recommendation to you, RJ. He says, one piece of advice I would like, one piece of advice would be take notes on what he says to you when you butt it. That is a very good thing.
Oh, so, yeah. And this, I was just scoping out how long the material was going and all that. Most of the stuff that I was just keeping in my head, because I knew that the little 3-minute response time is really short. And
yeah, I think Paul won this debate. We're going to go with Paul. Paul won this debate.
But the other RJ, if I may offer one more technical bit of things. So when you were typing in live chat during, first of all, that looked kind of bad. Second of all, we could really hear you, and it sounded it therefore sounded like you were ignoring and dismissing him. Like it made you sound unnecessarily dismissive and not paying attention, because we could hear you type. So all I would say is, like, maybe mute when it's not your time to speak.
Yeah, and
address what he was saying.
Point, because I said I was listening to him attentively all the time, even while I was putting in the comments.
I know you were, but from the audience perspective, we can hear our
good point. Yeah. Mute so that it cannot hear my telltale.
Yeah, and your rebuttals, you want to go after what he said. You don't want to go on some tangent that you want to talk about, which is good stuff. I mean, obviously, like the the reptile-mammal transition, great stuff, obviously, but he really wasn't addressing that. He was going on. Starting with macroevolution, and then I still don't know if he even understands what speciation is, or if he accepts it or not. I would like to suss that out. Does he accept speciation?
Yes, he does.
That would have been a question to deal with.
Yeah, he does. Okay. Because, however, it doesn't help us, because he's of the camp, from what I gather, that speciation is not a change in kinds.
Right, and I get that, but at least he understands that in actual biology, speciation occurs. Because I mean, I deal with people all the time. They go to my channel, oh, speciation is a myth, things don't ever speciate, and yet I can show them creation.com that says, hey, we believe speciation. Yes, stop telling. They make creationists look even more dumber than they really are. When you go to creation.com and they even say this is the argument you should not use, and they still say, oh well, they're wrong. Okay, well, where do you go from there? They're not believing the evolutionist, not believing the creationist. That's a strange.
Indeed. Well, anyway, yeah, we couldn't have blown through the. I don't know. Maybe I should have cut out a question. Then we would have been a little bit ahead of schedule. And we could have gotten into the the more open type of stuff. But we'll do it again. And he's not.
Yeah.
I will say that if there's one thing that that Mark is not, is he is he's not what you'd call disingenuous. If he says he's going to look at the website, he will. And actually, he already messaged me on Twitter. Well, first off, asking if he did okay. It's yeah, it's fine. But what he says he's going to do, I believe he will do.
Did you tell him that other people want to talk to him as well?
Not so much. I just said, good job. I'll no doubt we'll be arguing about something on Twitter tomorrow. I'll cover all that stuff, and that there were, how he'd feel about the more open format with. Although, don't you think he might feel like he might get ganged up on? Even though I know he wouldn't, it would just be. I mean, I know how we ask questions. It's not like we're going to gang up on him, but he has no way of knowing that.
Possible. But there you are. You know what? That's a
AJS jumps in there and says, a duck, an eagle, and a velociraptor walk into a bar. The bartender says, hey, we don't serve your kind in here.
Okay, that's a winner. I like it.
But Cy, we've all been in rooms where we're the primary target, right? We've all been in rooms where we've been outnumbered. It's just part of the dynamic of being on Google Hangouts, right?
Yeah, it is. But for the initial, for tonight, for the start, just giving not just the reality, but the appearance as well of a level playing field was sort of important. I certainly didn't want to make anyone feel like they were coming into a hostile audience. So,
yeah.
Oh, I would be hostile to him. I would be very respectful. I just have questions that I'd like to see if he can answer.
Indeed. Well, we will be doing it again, and
I'm so excited you did this, RJ, because I think you're going to be an excellent debater as you go. You got all the skills. You just need practice.
Just got to learn that presupposition. The universe exists and we can understand it. Next presumption.
And there's one more you can add too, and that is predictive modeling that has utility that actually makes predictions is better than a model without predictive abilities. That's also
and that the model that actually is useful and leads to new knowledge is more likely to be true. That's Occam's razor kind of thing.
Yeah,
and the notion. I got to figure out how to turn it into a bumper sticker, but the scholarly methods thing is the core. I'm literally starting from that first, and I would contend that you can weed out bad reasoning before you get to all of the higher level assumption things. So it says you haven't earned the right to be on this field because you do this and this and this, which is bad dog stuff.
Yeah, and just remember, if they say, well, my presupposition, like gods exist. Okay, well, the difference is, James, you can function without making that assumption God exists. He cannot function without the assumption the universe is real. That's the difference. So use that to your advantage.
Yes, good point.
No, actually,
I've been down the precept route. How many times? we know their arguments.
Yeah, actually,
we need presuppositions, the musical.
we got to get Sci 10 in there. I wasn't too disturbed that the topic of the moral, having a moral supreme authority and all that sort of thing came up, because that's actually I don't see that as a problem.
Ask the question.
It's a good topic, but that was not the debate in here, though.
Well,
the title was evolution.
Yeah. You asked the question.
Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, you did ask the question.
I thought we were going to be discussing flood geology, and so that was something that I had to kind of gear shift at the last minute, because it was essentially all about just generic evolution rather than the young Earth creationist flood issues.
We'll need a different guy for that. I don't mean not you, RJ. I mean a different guy on their end. That is not. I don't suspect any of that is Mark's. What's an old corporate term? Bailiwick. I don't think that's his bailiwick.
Yeah, you mean he doesn't really ponder? He doesn't really ponder too much pyroclastic flows in his anesthesiology gig.
No, but you could definitely go like the example with the whole human chromosomes fusion. That would be something that he may be familiar with because that has to do with medical, right? That he obviously knows what chromosomes are. He knows what telomeres are. He might be able to address something like that. Why talk to him about flood geology? I would think that
yeah.
You know.
Well, that's actually where I encountered him initially. He was defending flood geology on Twitter. That's what I had him in my little notations in my spreadsheet. Was that was what he was talking about. So I was anticipating that as the direction it was going. But you know, I improvised. We moved over to evolution. Okay, I can handle that.
At least he wasn't rude. He seemed like a nice guy, very congenial.
Oh, so the vast majority of anti-evolutionists are not truculent sons of bitches. In fact, really? I'm much more likely to be encountering, in my own experience, annoying atheists are more on the field than typical annoying creationists. Most of them are charming, affable, perfectly fine people in that respect. So,
I can't say that I've had the same experiences as you then.
Well, a lot
now,
of
some are.
I can throw in my experiences because the people that I talk to are mostly people I encounter on Twitter, and when you talk to them in person, it's completely different. There's a lot less animosity than there is on Twitter, and I don't know. I always blame it on the fact that Twitter doesn't have any intonation, and that's why a live talk always is better. But at least that's my experience. I actually became friends with three of the people that I've talked to. One of them is a young Earth creationist, and the other one is a flat earther.
Okay, but look at some of the creationists on Twitter that I'm assuming that we probably know a lot of the same ones. I mean, look at like Paul Nowal or Joe whatever what's his last name?
Sinkowski.
Yeah, Sinkowski. Yeah, whatever. I mean, he's been on Ashes or Cytesia Perceptium's channel a few times. He is just an idiot. He's just rude. He's obnoxious. He's an idiot.
That's a nasty thing. It's insulting to all the idiots of the world.
He's been doing this for 7 years out of his trailer. He's learned nothing. The guy is just a waste of air.
Low-level parasitical analyst. And in some respects, he's in the same boat as a Kent Hovind. These are people who have a good spiel and a gift of gab and a persona and a well-honed shtick. Well, Joe doesn't have a well-honed, but nevertheless, Kent at least does. But they're all operating out of the same kind of seat-of-the-pants, old-school creationism. These are not people who are detail fiddlers. Gish was a detail fiddler. Tompkins is a detail fiddler. An awful lot of the higher-level ones.
You see Benaberry's question, RJ?
I put a blurb up there. You put that.
Yeah, but people like Joe don't understand that high-level detail stuff, right? Joe has no idea what the hell Tompkins writes. No clue in the world. He doesn't understand these concepts, right? He just finds something, he parrots it and treats it as gospel because he's just dumb.
Yeah, and that's true of most lower level echelon people, just in the terms of the people that I've looked at in the main tip thing. 95% of them don't cite primary material. They just imitate somebody else. And it's often hilarious to see just how far they will go in repeating an argument that is not their own before they kind of realize that they're out on the gangplank and they don't really have a next thing to go to because where their original argument went and they don't.
Did you subscribe to Take That, Darwin? He finds all the. There's a guy named Take That Darwin on Twitter.
Yes, that's how I don't follow any lower echelon creationists.
Yeah, he does.
I wait for Take That Darwin and the others to look at it for me. I build up a catalog of ones because what they're doing is doing a heuristic measurement of what grassroots anti-evolutionists are. And you're much more likely to encounter a Kent Hovind believer in there than somebody that's read Michael Behe.
Oh, yeah.
That's just the fact of the matter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, the ones I do follow are higher echelon ones. So everybody who is a major creationist that's on anti-evolutionist that's on Twitter, Ross, Fazal Rana, although he doesn't tweet a hell of a lot, Axe and Gauger, or Gager, and Denise O'Leary, Klinghoffer, that little troll, and then Kent Hovind, although he doesn't interact, and Eric Hovind and all that. So I'm kind of monitoring what they're talking about, what shows up on their scope. And so it's kind of a meta-analysis to see where the field is. It also bothers me that the NCSE never pushes back against any of these people.
Oh, that reminds me, the Fuzz is coming back on the 23rd. Which, by the way, did you like his answer to me on Facebook? I thought he did an okay job. You know, I had a question that I asked him, and he put it on his Facebook and explained it. I think, though, you know, Fuzz and Hugh, I mean, I admit they're brilliant scientists, but I do think they let the whole RTP cloud their judgment when it comes to being objective a lot. I see Fuzz making a lot of the same mistakes I make any other creationists make, which is surprising because Fuzz is extremely intelligent. I mean, brilliant in his biochemistry, nice guy. And it kind of pains me a little bit when he makes these same silly mistakes I see many other creationists make.
He showed up in my punctuated equilibrium chapter because he is literally only one of two people who has ever tried to connect punctuated equilibrium with actual biological examples. Casey Luskin is the other one. And Rana cited like 4 different papers of which he gets the content of all of them wrong. This is sad.
Are these intentional? Because he doesn't come across as somebody I think is duplicitous or deceptive. I think he's an honest guy.
Oh no, when you look at it, he first of all, he wants to kind of show the punctuated equilibrium is a problem for evolution. And so he cites a paper that doesn't, 2 papers that don't discuss it, and he thinks they do. And then he finally gets to another couple of papers which are talking about a different issue, but they are actually having material that actually talk about speciation events and others. So he's having to step around these things in this higher level of apologetic quote. And Hugh Ross is exactly the same way. That the scholarly methods thing, when you look at what material they cite and how they deal with it, their brains turn into mush when they're looking at these material. It's fascinating. Now, when they get into their cosmological arguments where they're defending standard cosmology, they can be as rigorous and meticulous as all get out, and are.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I got to come up with some questions for him on the 23rd, and Bill Ludlow is going to be talking to him. So we'll have to get together the next day or two.
Who is C. Brown?
RJ,
RJ, are you going to debate C. Brown?
C. Brown is literally the bottom of the bottom of the bottom of the crust of the crap that forms on the bottom of a barrel.
Is he down arm wrestling with Edgar?
I couldn't even tell you which one's worse. Okay, I'll give you one of his claims because he has had so many goddamn stupid claims. His claim is that all the heavier isotopes, including uranium, plutonium, anything 92 or higher, he has believed came into existence. Ready for this? Because of lightning strikes.
Oh, okay.
Yes, lightning strikes.
Got it.
So he thinks that there's something called Z-pinch, which is a real phenomenon. Z-pinch uses electromagnetic fields to compress hydrogen into very small areas, so it goes very high temperature, so you have fusion addition. But he thinks that this can actually apply to heavier elements, such as transuranic elements. There's huge problems with that. I actually had a friend of mine that you guys know, Antoine Brett from the Facebook, who's a PhD in plasma physics. Come on, explain to this guy why that's this goddamn stupid. And of course, C. Brown's like, well, what does he know? He's only a PhD in plasma physics, you know. And C. Brown works at McDonald's. So, man, what are you going to do? You know.
I got to see whether or not I've got. I have not interacted with a C. Brown.
Actually, he's not. He doesn't work at He works. He actually does photography. But C. Brown is dumb. Just god awful dumb.
Steve is having a chat with.
Yeah, Walt Brown would be another kettle of fish because he's one of the fact claimants in creationism, and so he's a heavy guy the same way Tompkins.
Steve's having a chat with him.
I'm not. Well, I'm having an online chat with him. In other words, we can. Yeah, if you have you want to ask some questions.
Yeah, I have questions I want to ask him, but I'm sure RJ does too.
Yeah. Well, you can ask them any way you want, but I prefer if you go to the Great Debate Community page, and I have a section right there for questions just for Humphreys.
Okay, because I know a bunch of the stuff from Eric Coven's upcoming movie or from Humphreys stuff, so I'd love to get that on record now so that I can use it for the stupid.
Well, go there, ask them. I will ask them tomorrow, and then he said he'll get back to me. He's more than happy to answer the questions. He's just hesitant to come on to a hangout because reasons, I guess. So
fair enough. I read his research. I understand.
All right. Yeah, well, I mean, I don't think he wants to be confronted with his rates the heat problem and a bunch of other stuff that he knows he can't answer.
Sure.
So, but we'll see what he answers as far as written stuff. Now, when Bergman comes on, he's all for it. He's like looking forward to it. He's like, yeah, bring it on, kind of thing. I'm like, awesome.
I just made a note for myself because Humphreys came up during today's debate. When James was trying hard not to laugh every time a name came up.
Yeah. I mean, it's like, wow, he's sprung these things that I, as the poor benighted evolutionist, will never have heard of.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, like, you know, we're in contact with these people. I have emails from Snelling, Wood, Tompkins. The one thing they all have in common, besides Bergman, is that none of them are willing to go into a hangout and talk to experts and have their conjecture blogs challenged. None of them.
Yeah, I would have loved to have made it over to the University of Montana, because I think Ord and Snelling and a third one were there doing a little AIG show at the university. And boy, I wanted to get over there, but I couldn't swing the budget.
We're trying. Well, we were kicking around the idea of coming back down here in November. And we were kicking around the idea of how we could get to Texas and just kind of go like knock on their door and say, "Hey, there's Tompkins here," and then videotape it and ask him, man on the street kind of thing, spur of the moment, but because that would be awesome, right? I mean, hey Tompkins, we have some questions for you, and to see what he does.
Well, the university
tomorrow.
What's that, Paul?
I was going to say, I think I should have thought of this. Danny Faulkner is going to be in Oregon tomorrow to watch the eclipse. That's close enough to Argentina.
There you go. Let's go talk to Faulkner.
Yeah.
I'm on a hill somewhere, so.
Yes, out in the middle of nowhere on there. Yeah. Faulkner is fascinating a bit, and Jason Lyle and all that. The young Turks on that.
I want Lyle. I want Lyle to come in. That's who I want.
See, the new breed of young Earth creationists. It's a different dynamic than what you find in intelligent design, because the intelligent design movement is the big poobahs at the Discovery Institute. If a bomb blew them up, it would just vaporize it. But most of the fact claimants in current creationism are these little young Turks that write the little articles for Acts and Facts. They're the coming generation. The old guard are kind of passing away and turning geriatric. And the Institute for Creation Research is frankly becoming less and less relevant. So Answers in Genesis seems to me, in relation to the social dynamic, essentially the cutting edge of creationism, and therefore they're the ones you have to target in terms of responses.
Yeah, and I also think that the up-and-comings are the more dishonest, too. The older kinds, yeah, I think they used to believe this stuff. I don't think a lot of them buy their own bullshit anymore, but they're so entrenched in it, they just can't give it up. But I see a lot of like Lyle, I don't think he's, I mean, he knows this stuff is bullshit. He knows that he cannot make his, theories like asynchronous light work out. He knows that the universe appears to be billions of years old. He accepts that. That's either, I mean, he's lying to himself, if not lying to other people.
Yeah, but Lyle started his own mystery.
That's what Tortugan brains do.
A couple weeks ago, Lyle started his own mystery. I don't know if you guys saw that. He left ICR and he's got his own Creation Today style thing that looks like he's going to be trying to cash in more. I think being the middleman is good enough.
Well, that to me is not surprising. That's what I think these guys are all duplicitous. They're in it just to look at Eric's thing. I mean, these guys are all just in it to start their own little ministry to fleece people. It is a religious organization that's out for money. That's it. That's it.
You have the same attitude my mom did. Her attitude was that all preachers were sky pilots that were just in it for the money. And I'm more charitable on that.
Yeah, no, I don't believe that. I think a lot of preachers are actually legit and they really believe what they believe. And they're not in for the money. But the ones that I'm referring to, yeah, it is greed. Their God is the almighty dollar. For God's sake, Hogan's son, Chad, has something called Godonomics. Godonomics.
Oh yeah, the other, yes, they're the fascinating of, well, there's a long-standing structure of kind of like a Christianizing dominionist version of economics that circulates around in that Culture Camp network, and Eric and the Hovins are in that lower echelon element. So this is a long-standing bit. The other little loose cannon is Casey Luskin, because he left the Discovery Institute for parts unknown. I don't imagine he's going to stop being an anti-evolutionist. He's supposedly doing stuff on like homeschooling education books and things, but at the moment I haven't seen where he suddenly popped up out of the woodwork.
Yeah, they're all like the Peter Popoffs of young Earth creationism though anymore. Are we keeping you up, Strike?
No,
we
but
just late for you.
No, but I've run out of coffee, which is definitely a problem. If you'll excuse me for a minute, it's time to activate the Keurig.
Well, I wasn't even able to make my iced tea yet, so I was reduced to water.
Oh my! All right, talk amongst yourselves. I'll be back in a minute.
How pathetic!
And no one is thinking about me. It's coming up 5:30 for me.
Yeah, you're
in the morning.
You're in Europa.
In the morning.
You're bananas, Peter. We all know that.
That's about the time I go to bed.
No,
I've been going to sleep early.
This was just too interesting, and I'm through the work that I do, I'm almost every night I'm up late. So if it isn't in music, it's on here. So
yeah, well, I'm a night owl thing. I'm happy that AJS noticed. I thought the best part was when Mark admitted he never checked his sources. From my methods point of view, that was a golden moment for me. That sudden look of blank confusion that I'd ask him something so weird that
I had a similar
sources.
James, I had a similar thing with Kent Hovind when he said microevolution is possible, but macro isn't. And I've noticed that no one ever asks where it stops. So if microevolution is possible, is it possible to have microevolution after microevolution after microevolution? And if not, what's the mechanism that's stopping it? And
that is literally a universal. That's the one that makes Paul annoyed. That I could be absolute on it, but unfortunately, it's literally absolute. I don't know of any example anywhere in the anti-evolution literature from St. George Mavard in the 1870s all the way down to Michael Denton, where anybody, even ones who accept speciation, ever apply it to anything to boundary by example where the boundary layer is. None. There are no counterexamples.
Yeah, but what I'm curious about is that in the debates that I've seen, no one has ever put pressure on that particular point, which I think is strange.
Well, it's from a methods point of view, I think we need to.
You need to make it personal then, James. You need to say, you know what? I've read all this stuff and I've never seen anyone do it. Mark, tell me, where do you set the boundary? Like you instead of making him defend what everyone else wrote, you know, I would just say, Mark.
Yeah, that's a good point. And there, I think if we'd had more conversational time, I would have liked to have been able to get into that. It was really tough to try to figure how to pick my things within the 3-minute time frame, because all of those, to get him to explain what his view is, because I suspect he doesn't have a view. He's literally never thought about this, and you're going to get these deer in the headlight moments where he's never thought to apply it to anything.
And that's where he'll probably then quote your favorite hits, and you can debunk those greatest hits instead of making him debate. Well, you did go to the ones he listed, so that was good. James, my favorite moment that you had in the debate was when you said hello to his daughter, because he spent 3 entire minutes ignoring her and kind of shoving her aside, and it was kind of like weird dad scene. And also,
she was cute. I wish I had another one. My daughter's now 12, and I missed that time when she was like between like 2 and 5 with the curly hair and the cute smile and the daddy, you're God kind of thing. Now it's like, she's independent, thinks she's like ready.
Daddy, leave me alone.
But also, like, to say hi, and James said hi to her. Like that was all she wanted. So that was that was great.
It was cute.
We're human. We disagree, but still, it's a human thing, and they need to get past the notion that the opponents are somehow living in a different planet in some respects, we're living in exactly the same planet. Everybody wants the best life they can for their family and their world. And what we disagree about so spectacularly are the mechanisms of doing that.
Well, like I said, he was civil, and I'm cool with that. I like those kind of younger creationists that are civil. You can have a discussion with, because the other ones you just can't. They're just not reasonable enough to.
He also didn't preach, which I really liked. He didn't give a sermon at the end.
Mm.
Yeah, that's more Kent style. He directly connects it to his evangelicalism, and that's true of an awful lot of deeper anti-evolution apologetics, including intelligent design, where they tend to pick religious venues to show the shows, and they will directly have little prayer moments and that sort of thing.
Mm.
I like Hovind's approach. It's argumentium ad baculum. Believe what I tell you, or you're going to hell.
Yeah, actually, with the Kent Hovind,
that really is a great form of argumentation.
With the Kent Hovind thing, I don't know how you guys cannot get dizzy, because he keeps 180, but he keeps looping back to the same things.
I can only keep them on track so much, right? Because it's their debate. But
yeah,
I know when eventually I have to step in, and even with live chats going, let's move on.
I
know at the point.
If you look at and another one who was also brilliantly tactical was Duane Gish. He was extremely good at deflection. Very, very effective. When he would
uses that style.
Ross, boy, he just shoot him up.
Yeah, they like that style. There are ways of shutting down Gish galloping, though, right? But you have to have pinpoint accuracy on.
Yeah, I would have loved. That's the one person I would have been. But he died before I ever had a chance to deal with him, because he's Gish is in a rare category. He was one of the great detail fiddlers of all time. Casey Luskin is the Duane Gish of intelligent design, just by volume, and it's a relatively rare skill. It involves fabulously tactical parsing of data. Everybody does that in apologetic documentation, but to be a master of it, to know just exactly the right little thing to pick out to make the nugget. There's a degree of art form in it, perverse, but still admirable in a weird way.
Well, isn't the same with sophistry or polemics? I mean, it's
yeah, you gotta,
really amazing. It's an art form.
Yeah, you go, wow, that's good. You know, there was a moment when I watched. There was a Hitler speech that I watched years ago in the interdisciplinary thing, and by that time I learned enough of German. And there was a speech. I think it was one of the Nuremberg rallies. And he's delivering this spiel, which sounds as typical for a Hitler speech. Most of it's not a big thing. He's not talking about the Jews. He's just talking about the German people and what they need to do and so forth and so on. And you're going to get Volkswagens. Anyway, he had a particular line where he got a really good reaction in the audience. And he looked down with this wonderful smug, oh, that's a good one. I'll have to remember that look on his face. And it's knowing the viciousness of the man, and yet you could also appreciate how he was tactically playing the audience and looking at the little bits that he could make to best advantage. Silence.
I'm trying to think back to the last Hitler speech I listened to. I got nothing.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever listened to a Hitler speech.
No.
Yeah, I know. Yes,
not something I do in my spare time.
As I'm following the president, who had a copy of Hitler's speeches on his night table when he was married to wife number one. So you know we have a standard to look up to or down to, depending on your point of view.
I try and avoid his speeches too. And then there was silence.
Yeah, let's bring in Hitler to really upgrade. That's why I was amused at the point of here's this poor little girl.
The one Jew in the room was not entertained.
We're about to talk about morality and communism and Pol Pot and killing millions of people and all of that, you know. And there's the girl wandering around, you know, wondering, you know, where's an ice cream cone or something. I guess
everywhere I go, they talk about Hitler. I tell you, they just like, oh, Steve's a Jew. Let's talk about Hitler.
Welcome to the internet. It's.
And I think most of us are here to avoid watching any news about the U.S. president, so don't bring that. Like, don't invade our.
Well, I probe all the material from a methods angle because methods are the problem, and so I began to probe Dinesh D'Souza because he popped up on the anti-evolution scope, and Coulter as well, and so I naturally track anybody who shoots their mouth off. That guy over in Britain, Wilson, who just wrote that anti-Darwin diatribe, and anybody that pokes their head up, boy, that's hashtag tip. I got to follow it.
Hey, RJ, I don't know how much you look at your own analytics, but whenever you do a video where you have Dinesh D'Souza in the title, you have way more views. I would just say, keep doing that.
Oh, yeah, I've had quite a lot of things off of that. And, of course, I regard him as an absolutely reprehensible prick. And I hold him in absolute contempt. He's a dangerous, nasty, vicious, and sloppy scholar. And he has a huge following of people who just regard him as a veritable god. And he's a dangerous personality. I am following him with a certain measure of care. And, of course, I like poking at his thing. He's never really tried to respond on the Spanish Inquisition case, but how can he? And he moves on. Oh, yeah, and I bumped in. There was a defender of his that we went on and on about evolution. He was the intelligent design one that I was telling Cy about, that the guy was just trolling material, and I was knowing where he was getting the material from, and I was just kind of waiting to see how far he would press the matter. It was just delightful. That shows you the network it goes in there. See, Dinesh is not a believer in young earth creationism, but he doesn't want to think about him either. And so to call attention to, this guy wasn't one, but there are young earth creationists that would pop into his frame, and I would reveal that. And then I'd say, hey, Dinesh, would you like to have some comments about the kind of people that are supporting you and Mr. Trump? Needless to say, he does not reply. No one expects the Spanish Inquisition, Stephen Bauman said. Well, I wasn't expecting anybody to be as stupid as Dinesh was to argue that the Spanish Inquisition really wasn't so bad, which is what he did. And when I heard about that, I went, whoa, I gotta see how he does that. And that's what it turned out. He built his entire argument on a single work, which was a really good work. And the guy should read it sometime, because it's a really wonderful work. And Dinesh was completely misrepresenting its content. So that one was really a useful measure of Dinesh reading a legitimate work and completely mangling its content to fit his ideological perspective, because he really doesn't like the idea of Christians going around killing a lot of people for religious reasons during the Inquisition. So he wants to downplay those numbers in the same way Noam Chomsky downplayed Pol Pot.
Well, don't forget, biblically, slavery wasn't so bad.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that Wilson guy that Christopher Hitchens debated wrote a gobsmacker of a work where he was arguing, yeah, that's slavery stuff really wasn't so bad. It was kind of good for the slaves. And so he's a defender of Southern slavery in that respect. I bump into his brother every once in a while. He's a creationist down there and haunts the Darwin on the Palouse shows that they have every year. And it's bad method has consequences. Yeah, Stephen Baum, RJ, I remember you talking about that. Your analysis of him is correct. Thank you for reinforcing my superiority on that matter. Thank you, Stephen. Yeah, it's Dinesh D'Souza is reflective of a particular mindset, and as is Ann Coulter and Alex Jones, another one that I follow. He's farther out on the wingnut fringe, but they reflect an absolute addiction to secondary sources. And Dinesh, even though he comes across as this patrician scholarly guy, is still effectively a secondary source addict, which makes him exactly as stupid as Jeranism.
Why is Jaron always the yardstick?
Oh, well, I would think it's a fairly, yes, well, especially a 1.8 billion ton yardstick. He's the perfect one. Well, because that's why the flat earth is really a useful measuring element, because boy, if there's something that's really not true, it's flat earth. So you have to look methodologically. Now, Poes, who are just pretending to be flat earth, is another matter. But if you look at the other ones, it's methodologically, pathologically addicted to secondary sources. They don't fact check. Fino has just asked a question, I think. Weren't the Spanish Inquisition mostly Jesuits? They're highly stupid, studied people, and probably we will have little problems to get green cards in the future of the new system. Yeah. I'm trying to think. The weird thing, it wasn't specifically the Spanish Inquisition, but in general, all of the various monk groups in Christianity had their ups and downs. There were times when the Franciscans were sons of bitches. I seem to think it was the Benedictines that ran most of the slave labor plantations down in South America. during the 16th and 17th century. And remember, even in our own context, the Quakers started out in the slave trade. And then only in the 17th and 18th century did they get this big crisis of conscience, and they finally went like, this is not like good, and turn into abolitionists. But it took them a while to get in there. The Jesuits were the kind of the shock troops of the Counter-Reformation, because remember, all of these frightening stuff tend to come about when people are fearful. And you had the Protestant Reformation, you had the 30 Years' War going on Germany that decimated half of the population. You had everybody going into auto-da-fe and panic. And the big witchcraft trials were during the Reformation, because now you had stuff where too many of the religion, both on the Protestant and the Catholic side, were having their fundamental dogmas challenged by the other. And they had states sponsoring that. So that's when they really started looking out for scapegoats. So if the little old lady down the lane happens to have a wart in the wrong place and seems to know too much about toads, well, she's a witch, and that's responsible for the plague we just had. And then, of course, over in Russia, they would just go after the Jews. So you have all these panic-stricken times, and that's why you don't want social systems to fall apart. I don't think Hitler could ever have taken power if you hadn't have had a global depression. He would have been the nutball, bad portrait landscape painter who griped about the Jews when he swept his walk, and that would be about as far as it went. But because the whole economy collapsed with a series of bad economic policies, that's where bad things escalate into even worse things. So that's why I'm not happy about the current world we're living in.
Indeed. All right. So.
Yeah. So who do I debate next?
Well,
Maddie Lawrence.
Let's not forget, you got to do part 2 of this one because we ran out of time. So,
oh yeah, whenever you want to set that one up there, we'll see. We will assume then, as an honest person, that he will have been ferreting through my material. In which case, have at it, Buckaroo.
Indeed. And let's not forget, he also indicated that some of the things he was not an expert on, he said he was going to get some responses from AIG or ICR, which is great.
Which is
but
an eerie appeal to authority.
Who is he going to ask? Because we are asking the same people he's asking.
Yeah.
Well, we shall see. Let us not do his work for him. And,
there's only 2 people at AIG who have ever expressed anything like half an opinion on the reptile-mammal transition, and that's Wood Murray and Elizabeth Mitchell.
But why, if he's going to go to them, why don't they just come on directly? They know who we are. We've been bugging them to come on forever.
Well,
because they're pathetic, craven little cowards. Didn't you figure that out, Steve?
Right.
Yeah, no, I pretty much reached that conclusion one time ago.
No one says they will. No one says they will not. Perhaps after Mark.
Yes, perhaps.
Bergman's looking forward to it. So I can't. I mean, he's so maybe there's hope, but the rest of them,
I've never seen Bergman in action, because there are examples of people who are quite affable and pleasant in person, and they tend to maintain a certain degree of affability and scholarly things in their writing. Casey Luskin is that way. But Bergman is a nasty, vitriolic, no holds barred. He writes it in this kind of scholarly manner, but boy, he is just a fascinatingly tendentious guy. He's the one who puts puff pieces up about Louis Agassiz, and all the creationists that have ever been have always been exemplars of perfection. And I first kind of bumped into him because of the claims he made about the Tasmanian genocide. Matter of fact, since he's going to be on, you might want to kind of pay attention to this a little bit. He asserted that the Tasmanian genocide was due to evolution, that the nasty evolutionists were teaching that the races were inferior, and so all these evolutionists were putting all the poor Tasmanian natives away in like concentration camps, and they ended up dying. Well, the problem is the chronology, because the settlers in Tasmania, all Christians, were starting to basically put them on reservations before Darwin was even born. And almost all of them had died off long before
minor detail.
Minor detail of chronology. And that when you actually looked at the background of these things, there were a lot of preachers and stuff that thought they were doing God's work by bringing more Christian settlers in and getting the Tasmanian natives backed onto an island for them to just not be cared about anymore. So the idea that this could in any way be laid at Darwin's door is just twaddle.
Well, that's what they all kind of do. I mean, look at Hovind. He's been trying to push that whole narrative forever. But like, as I'm being summoned by my minions, so I will
summon your minions.
No, I'm being summoned by my minions. I gotta go do some. But this was great, Sci-Fi. I'm loving this. So let us know when he comes back though, because we do want to like. Well, I specifically would love to have a conversation with this guy Huffman. Yes, Peter.
Do you know of anyone from AIG who ever agreed to do a live talk?
Besides Bergman, no.
None, because I'd like to have a chat with one or two of them.
Wait a line.
Well, who knows? Maybe things will change. Look, we did
pick a number.
Tompkins agreed, and then he backed out. Ruhif now has 3 more papers or blogs, that he's written that he wants Bergman to address, which was based upon a combined blog that Bergman and Tompkins wrote. Ruhif has some
he's done quite a few co-authored papers with Bergman, so you can kind of sweep into the Tompkins issue that way. I think
that's exactly what we're going to do. Yeah.
Well, see,
but most of them won't. Peter.
Tonight's debate may have accomplished another goal. When Mark talks to his associates, I mean, the one thing he's going to say is that he was not just bullied and fallen upon like by a trampled by horses and all.
Right,
that
that's good. That's good. Right,
and that will give anyone that was thinking, no, I'm not talking. I know what's going to happen. I'm going to go talk to them, and a bunch of them are just going to yell at me. This could show that we're not that kind of people. We really do want to have a conversation. So. We may see things change.
Yeah.
I mean, this was a small thing, but
I agree.
It would be nice if we could have that effect.
If even stupid ones can be discussed in a coherent manner, and if you can't dispose of a stupid idea without raising your voice, you're in the wrong gig.
Okay, bye, Steve. Steve had to go.
Yeah.
You're still listening.
Yeah, and after we went out of our way to invite him in, all he could do would be to be here for like an hour and a half.
Is that all? Unbelievable. I was after demanding a spanner. Well, no.
Anyway, apart from my not being up to snuff on the presupposition defense, I feel happy with what I did.
Yeah. You presented yourself well. So did Mark, actually. So both of you.
Yeah. Oh, he was an affable fellow, and I can imagine that and it's a fair thing to actually compliment. And in fact, if we'd gone on to where we had a little more time for like the end game, that it's a matter that it takes a certain amount of guts and pluck to go into the lion's den, which is exactly what he was doing.
Yeah. And really, he had no idea what to expect because.
Literally, he was behind my curve in that he had never done these kind of chats before. So I was trying to be as pleasant as possible to kind of guide him through and point him out where the buttons were.
Didn't that feel weird?
So he could get on to the same shtick because I've been through the same thing.
Didn't that feel weird, RJ? You instructing someone in how to use technology?
Well, I've always, once I understand a thing, then I tend to be the one that they think knows already about it. When I would be going around, when I visited Washington, D.C., back when their metro ran better than apparently it does now, but people would instinctively ask me for directions on the subway. And I would be pointing out, you just take the red line and you go down to Foggy Bottom and take the channel off of there. And I don't come from here, but I now understand the subway, so I can tell you where to get off on the various stations. I've only been here like an hour, but that's, no problem.
Indeed.
I also think that if you keep it civil, it's going to at least you're going to make a better case. If all you do is attack and put them down, that doesn't help. And maybe
it had no effect whatsoever. And anybody watching it, I'm never going to come across as other than a little bit of a stick up his butt smart know-it-all. It comes with the turf. I'm never going to downlive that.
Well, that's your
but
fault.
nonetheless,
You do know
I try
it
to
all.
be pleasant, and the fact that the daughter was there, and we're talking about the weather, and we're trying to get kind of like a field into things to make it so that it's not like you have to come in with your suit of armor on and your sword drawn.
Yeah, and one important thing is maybe not lumping him in with all the creationists. Be careful doing that. Taking on just him as
Find
a person.
out where he comes from. Yeah, that's why. Fortunately, he self-identified with a lot of material by the names he came up. Paul the Skeptic put in a very good question: has there ever been a creationist who's changed his or her mind, apart from lower echelon people who were raised in it or came into it during a period of time? That happens not infrequently. But upper-level anti-evolutionists, committed ones who are really sure evolution isn't true, in all of the last 150 years, offhand, I can't think of any who's changed their mind. I
can tell you too. Paul Agia and Karis, my co-host.
Yeah,
well, no offense, but they aren't in the upper echelon of anti-evolutionism.
No, okay. But
yeah, in grassroots kind of happens fairly recently. But if you would think the equivalent of somebody like Steve Meyer or somebody like the Dwayne Gish type over in there, at that level of apologetics, there's never an apostasy.
James, the question was a creationist, not an upper echelon creationist.
Yeah, and I put that in, you know, as the proviso. Yeah, there are all sorts of creationists you bump into. In fact, there was a hilarious example. I think McCready or McCreary or something like that. He was had what looked like a little career as a young Earth creationist apologist. He was writing young Earth creationist material, and then in his early 20s, and then suddenly he got a big epiphany in college, and he couldn't believe it anymore. And he's now written in quite a few postings where he's explaining how he stopped being a creationist, and ultimately is one where it's much easier for a creationist to change their mind if they were raised in it, and they don't have a Tuk mind, because then they get out in the real world.
There's another one, Sandra, who used to be Plato Poem. She wrote a creationist book, and literally while it was in printing, she deconverted.
Well, Martin Gardner had a creationist phase, and in many respects, E.O. Wilson says he was effectively raised in a creationist background, very religious family. Then Michael Shermer had a creationist phase in college. He was a Jesus freak, which is a hilarious thing to envisage. But yeah, it tends to happen. But it's easier for somebody raised in it to pull themselves away if they get out in the big world. That's what happened to Martin Gardner. He was raised in a fairly fundamentalist background. If you may not be old enough to remember Martin Gardner, Fads and Fallacies in the Name of Science, and he was, I think he died, maybe 5 or 10 years ago. Fabulous, super skeptic, brilliant. In fact, he had one of the best advice that I've ever heard for a writer. You want to know how little you know about a subject? Start writing a book about it. That the kind of stuff that would pass in an article, when you actually have to write a book, you realize, whoa, you have to up your game. And that was an important lesson that I have tried to embody in my own writing, that you have to tailor the scale of it to the ambition of what you're wanting to deal with.
Indeed. All right. Oh, and as for the upper level ones, you mentioned the ones that are really entrenched. Let's not forget, for some, there is a financial incentive to remain entrenched. It's not purely they really believe.
Yeah, and there it's one where the time will tell on it. What's interesting, you can look at it in political contexts. How many politicians cravenly hold to a belief for craven purposes, as opposed to ones that really believe the stupid shit? And from what my understanding of the various political structures, the ones who believe it as bullshit but for craven purposes are relatively rare. The one that pops up to mind most was George Wallace, who apparently had a much more liberal background in life, and he consciously decided that he's got to play the racist in order to win elections, and it was a devil's bargain that he made that he was fairly successful at, and it ate him alive inside. But I think that's relatively rare. Now, if you've got somebody like a Kent Hovind or a Ken Ham or a Steve Meyer that are pulling down 150 grand plus perks, how easy would it be if they had a sudden epiphany to decide not to do that anymore? But I'm a charitable chap. I give them the benefit of the doubt, and I'm assuming that they still believe all the stuff. The ones that are the intriguing ones are, to me, Todd Wood is just the puzzle that I'm really intrigued to know whether or not there might come some point down the road, if he has a tiny chink in his epiphany about religion, that he would just jump the ship and become an evolutionist.
Well,
because he seems to acknowledge all the data, and yet he can't believe it because of the dogma.
Well, there are people that say, I know the facts, but I believe this because I want to believe this. That's fine. We let him have it. But anyway, let me interject for a second, or interrupt for a second. I copied from the public chat. Was it Michael Henderson? Says, "Hey, Sci-Strike, I'm coming for the Eclipse from Arizona. Heard you guys were going too. Bought a Nikon P900 to film it. Got a solar filter for it. Other than that, don't know what to do." Okay. I'll give you a brief response here. I hope you get the glasses too. Yeah, it couldn't hurt to be a little safe. One, I hope you have a tripod. It's handy. What you're going to want to do. This is the briefest of brief discussions. Email me and I'll give you all of NASA's links. They tell you in great detail what you ought to do. But tripod, get your camera lined up with your solar filter and all that sort of thing. Solar filter on until totality, which means when the moon's coming in front of it, and you get the ring with the diamond ring thing, and then when you have totality, take the solar filter off, and you can even take your glasses off. Just be ready to put them back on when totality ends, because totality, it's no longer too bright. It's not going to hurt your eyes, and you'll see stars. And you're gonna have to. I don't know anything about the P900. If it has enough manual settings to where you can do a longer exposure. But while totality is occurring, take the solar filter off. Take a bunch of pictures. If you can lengthen the exposure a bit, so you'll get stars. If you lengthen it enough, you may get an effect called Earth shine. I think it is, isn't it? Where the sun reflected off the surface of the Earth lights up the face of the moon while totality is occurring. That would be a great picture to have. And then
everybody who says they've seen a total eclipse just is wowed by it. It's something that you never forget.
And then just make sure and then you got enough images during totality. Screw that solar filter back onto your camera. Put your glasses back on so you don't go blind. And then start snapping pictures again as totality ends, and you get the ring effect.
There was a partial eclipse that we saw in Spokane quite a few years ago, and I happened to be working at a place where they had welders, and so we had all the welding glasses out when we were looking at it.
So if that helps, if that helps give you, if you just do that, you should get some good shots. But again, email me. The email address is in the description for this video and just about all the videos. And I'll email you back the links that NASA gives you, and they go into great detail, the simple things you should do to make sure it's a rewarding experience and you go home with some memories that are going to last your whole life. Happy to help. All right. Okay, that was a bit more than a brief interruption. I'm sorry, guys. Carry on. But he asked a question.
Yeah, how dare you interrupt this with science?
Yeah, really. Where's Hillel? I thought this was supposed to be a science channel. But if it's an eclipse of this nature, if you can actually go to it, that could be a once-in-a-lifetime thing. You definitely want to make sure somebody can enjoy it and have memories of it for as long as possible. And there you go. Oh, yeah, I got a batch of camera. I'm actually building the thing when we get done tonight. I was having trouble getting just an equatorial mount because I have a couple of video cameras and things that I want to mount on an equatorial, so I bought the cheapest telescope I could find. It was a good telescope. It's a 70mm refractor that came with the tripod and the equatorial mount and the motor drive. And I took the telescope off and I gave that to a friend and made an aluminum mount. And I'm going to have 4 different types of cameras that are going to track the sun as it moves. You know what? Maybe if I finish it all up, maybe we'll have pictures of the construction before movie night. You know how like we did Andy's telescope construction? People seem to like that. Anyway, yeah, lots of cameras. Okay, I'm done interrupting now. And that's probably not true. Anyway, it's coming up on midnight over here. What do you guys think of wrapping it up?
Yep. Yeah, that sounds like I should have to go and finish my tea and all that other crap that I should have done before.
All right.
And
I have an off-topic question as well.
Okay.
Can we hang on after you shut this down?
Sure.
So I can ask you.
I'm not going to. I'm not running off after the thing's done. So let us say good night to everybody in the public chat. Thank you ever so much for joining us. Wouldn't be any fun at all without you guys. And and I guess that's it. Anybody have any closing comments for your audience?
No.
Don't accept any wooden penguins.
And all right, thanks everybody. And oh, hey,
I just want to thank everybody in the chat, and it's always good to see people hanging around this long. So that's spending a lot of time on the things that we do on YouTube. So I really appreciate that.
Indeed, me too. Thank you all.
And I just like to talk.
And here, I of course, owe a debt to a friend. You'll know what I mean in a minute.
Yeah, I've just screwed Paul the Skeptic's wooden penguin collection. Damn it. Ha ha. The market will drop. But you will be able to sell them to the people that keep the guard around the giant wall on the Curvison.
Oh, David, you're there. Look, there's David. He's on. David, we're gonna need a shipping address. We got the oven mitts in, and as a patron, you just get one. You don't actually have to do the contest. So
that's the David that we go.
This is the fellow you've all been cheering for all this time. David,
there we go.
If you could send me a shipping address. I don't know if you've seen the oven mitts for facial protection. They look something like this. So there you go. Get me a shipping address and I'll get it right out to you. Okay. Good night all. Thank you very much. And we'll see you next time.